Let me ask you this. Have you ever believed in something so much, poured everything you have into an idea, only to realize the world moved on without you? Well, picture this. It's April 7th, 1945. We are on the bridge of a ship that's way more than just steel and rivets. It's a 72,000-ton symbol of pure faith. This is the Yamato, the most powerful, most fearsome battleship ever built. It was a national secret, thought of as almost a divine weapon, the absolute pride of an empire. Her commanders, they called her Unsinkable. But then, on the horizon, something's coming. And it's not another fleet. It's not a rival battleship coming for a glorious duel, no. It's a swarm, hundreds of tiny specks that are getting bigger and bigger every second. And in this moment, all that faith is about to slam head-on into a terrifying new reality. A reality this ship, for all its might, was never built to face. This is the story of that collision.
You know, these words, they weren't in some official after-action report. They were found in the private journal of a young radar officer, Inan Mitsuru Yoshida. I really want you to try and put yourself in his boots for a second. Imagine, for years, you've been told this ship is supreme. You've walked its decks, you've felt the deep hum of its engines, you've seen those monstrous 18-inch guns that could literally blow anything out of the water. That was the promise. But now, you're staring at a radar scope, a little glowing screen, and it's telling you a completely different story. It's showing you this bloom of hundreds of contacts. And they're not ships. They're planes, and they're coming like a tidal wave. This quote, this is the exact moment a worldview shatters. It's that chilling realization that the promise was a lie, and the horizon doesn't hold glory, it holds total annihilation.
And this, right here, is the core of the Yamato's tragedy. On one hand, you've got the idea of the Yamato. It's a symbol, right? It's the Bushido code made of steel. It's this belief that with superior spirit and technology in one single ship, you could beat any odds. It was a massive source of national pride. But the reality, the cold, hard reality of 1945 was something else entirely. It was an antique, a gorgeous, powerful, terrifyingly beautiful dinosaur that had outlived its time. The world it was built to rule, an ocean decided by massive naval guns. That world was gone. It had been quietly taken over by a new king, the aircraft carrier, a floating airfield that could strike from hundreds of miles away.
So yeah, forget the symbolism for a minute. Forget the national pride. Let's just look at the brutal, simple math of it all. This slide tells you everything you need to know about how war had changed. This wasn't a fair fight. It wasn't about armor thickness versus shell size anymore. It was just a horribly lopsided equation. You have one massive target sitting in the middle of the ocean against almost 400 attackers that can hit from any direction at any time with total control of the sky. The outcome? It was decided before the first plane even took off. The real question wasn't if the Yamato would sink. The question was, how long could this monument to an old way of war last against the furious attack of the new one?
So how on earth did this happen? How does a brilliant, powerful nation pour its treasure, its best engineers, and all of its hopes into a weapon that was basically obsolete before it ever really got to fight? Well, to understand the end, we've got to go back to the beginning. We need to understand the dream that created the Yamato in the first place.
The key thing to get here is that the Japanese naval planners, they weren't stupid. They were realists. They knew, look, there was no way they could ever outbuild the industrial machine of the United States. They couldn't build 10 carriers for America's 10 carriers. It was impossible. So they went with a totally different strategy, one that was really deep in their culture. Quality over quantity. The idea of the single perfect warrior. Their plan was to build individual ships so much more powerful than the enemy's that one of theirs could take on and destroy several of ours. And the Yamato, along with its sister ship, the Musashi, well, they were the ultimate expression of that whole idea. They weren't just battleships, they were supposed to be super weapons.
And just look at these numbers for a second. Try to get your head around them. 72,000 tons. That is heavier than many modern aircraft carriers. A single one of its main gun turrets weighed more than an entire American destroyer from that time. The 18.1-inch guns were the biggest ever put on a ship, capable of thwarting a shell that weighed as much as a small car over 26 miles. And the armor on the front of those turrets, it was over 2 feet of solid steel. Think about that. 2 feet. This thing wasn't just a ship, it was a moving fortress, engineered to take a beating that would have ripped any other ship to shreds. It was, in every way you can measure, an absolute monster.
And you better believe Japan treated it like a state secret. The level of secrecy was almost paranoid. Workers were sworn to silence or they'd go to prison. The entire shipyard was covered in screens and camouflage to hide it from spies. But the craziest story is about its sister ship, the Musashi.
To hide its launch into the water, the government staged a fake air raid for the entire city of Nagasaki. They forced every single person inside just so nobody could see how enormous this new ship really was. That obsession tells you something, doesn't it? They truly believed this ship was their ace in the hole, the key to winning the war.
So you have this incredible superweapon. It officially joins the fleet just a week after Pearl Harbor. The stage seems set for this legendary career, right? But this is where the story takes a deeply ironic and tragic turn. The Yamato was a king who was crowned just as the idea of kingdoms was disappearing. It was the ultimate warrior, trained for a type of fight that nobody was fighting anymore.
And this timeline really tells that whole sad story. At the Battle of Midway, probably the most important battle of the Pacific War, where was the Yamato? 300 miles behind the action, too far away to help, just watching as its own aircraft carriers were destroyed by American planes. For most of 43 and 44, it just sat at anchor in a remote lagoon. Its biggest job was being a comfortable place for admirals to stay. The sailors even gave it a humiliating nickname, Hotel Yamato. Can you imagine the frustration of that crew? 3,000 men trained to operate the most powerful warship on the planet, and they're basically hotel staff. Why? Because the ship was now considered too precious to risk in a war that was all about airplanes.
And this right here, this is the epitaph for the Yamato, and really, for the whole age of battleships. The ship itself was an absolute marvel of engineering, a masterpiece. There was nothing wrong with its design. Its fatal flaw was just its timing. It was the perfect solution to a problem that didn't exist anymore. It was built to rule an age that had already ended, an age that was decisively finished by the very airplanes it was supposed to protect at Midway.
Which brings us to the very end. It's the spring of 1945. The war's lost, it's just a matter of time. American troops are hitting the beaches of Okinawa, the last island before mainland Japan. The Imperial Navy is basically a ghost. There's almost no fuel left. And out of this total desperation, a final, insane plan is born. A mission that wasn't about strategy. It was about symbolism. It was called Operation Tengo.
This is the voice of the man who was ordered to lead that suicide mission, Vice Admiral Ito. And it's just heartbreaking. This isn't some defiant warrior cry. This is the cold professional assessment of a man who knew he was being ordered to commit mass murder-suicide. He argued against it. He pointed out all the obvious flaws. No planes to protect them, not enough fuel to even get back. It was a pointless gesture. This quote is so important because it tells us the leaders knew. They weren't delusional. They were knowingly sending thousands of men to die for an idea, for what he calls propaganda value.
The plan itself, it's just chillin'. Every step is just a step further into oblivion. First, leave port with only enough fuel to get there. The choice to die is made before you even leave the harbor. Second, try to fight your way through the entire American fleet. Impossible. And then, the weirdest part, intentionally run the greatest battleship in the world onto a beach, turn it into a sitting duck. And the final step? The sailors, men of the sea, were supposed to become foot soldiers and fight until they were all killed. This wasn't a military plan. It was a ritual sacrifice.
So why? Why do it? What could possibly be the reason for such a plan? Well, according to survivors from the high command, the final push came from one simple question. During a meeting about how badly the defense of Okinawa was going, Emperor Hirohito supposedly turned to his admirals and asked, "What about the Navy?" For a Navy that was already so humiliated, that question was like a final judgment. They had no victories left to offer him, so they offered the only thing they had left, a spectacular, honorable death. The Yamato wasn't sailing to save Okinawa. It was sailing to save the Navy's honor.
And so, on April 6, 1945, the Yamato sailed out to sea for the last time. It didn't take long for the Americans to find it. The next morning, April 7th, the horizon started to fill up with those little specks the radar officer had feared. The final 2 hours of the battleship era had just begun.
The American attack wasn't some chaotic free-for-all. It was a cold, calculated execution. The pilots had specific orders. Ignore the right side of the ship. Hit it with every single torpedo on the left side. See, the goal wasn't just to poke holes in it. It was to use the ocean itself as a weapon, to force the ship to tilt, to flood, and to roll over as fast as possible. The Yamato was designed to maybe survive 3-4 torpedoes. It was hit by at least 11.
And at the same time, from thousands of feet up, the dive bombers were coming down. The main armor was incredibly thick, and it held up against a lot of the bombs, but it didn't even matter. They shredded the superstructure, they blew apart the anti-aircraft guns, started huge fires, and just wiped out the crew on deck. The ship was being systematically taken apart from every possible angle.
And the most shocking part is just how fast it all happened. The first bomb hit at 12:37 p.m. By 2:23 p.m., the Yamato had rolled over completely and vanished. 106 minutes. That's less time than it takes to watch a movie. That's all the time it took for the new age of air power to find, to fix, and to utterly destroy the ultimate symbol of the old age.
And this is the final, horrible cost of that symbolic gesture. Of about 3,300 men on the Yamato and its escort ships, over 3,000 of them died. Vice Admiral Ito, the man who knew the mission was pointless, and the ship's captain both chose to go down with the ship. It's just an almost unimaginable loss of life for a mission that was designed to accomplish nothing but a beautiful death.
This chart isn't just a bunch of bars and numbers. It's the final verdict. It is the exclamation point at the end of the battleship era. 6 Japanese ships, including the pride of the entire nation, and more than 3,000 lives, traded for 10 American airplanes. That whole idea of quality over quantity had been completely turned on its head and proven wrong in the most violent way possible. It confirmed, once and for all, who ruled the seas now.
Today, the Yamato lies broken in half, nearly 1,200 feet down at the bottom of the East China Sea. It's a war grave. But you know, stories like this, they don't just end when the ship goes down. The echoes from its final, massive explosion still ripple out today, and they have a lot to teach us, even now.
And that's the real question, isn't it? I mean, it was a colossal failure, a waste of money, a waste of genius, a waste of lives. It had almost zero impact on the war's outcome. So why should we, all these decades later, even care about this one ship? Why does its story still have such a hold on us?
Because the Yamato is more than just a ship. It's a timeless lesson. It's a story about being so in love with your own technology that you can't see it's not relevant anymore. It's a huge warning sign about the danger of clinging to old ideas, of letting pride and tradition blind you to what's really happening in the world. And it's maybe the most powerful reminder there is that courage and spirit, without a smart, realistic strategy, just leads to tragedy. And in Japan today, its ghost is still there, a complicated symbol of both past glory and the absolute futility of the path their country once took.
And that, in the end, is the lesson that echoes up from the deep. The Yamato was the biggest, strongest, most perfect answer to the question, how do you win a gun battle between battleships? The problem was, it sailed into a world that was asking a totally different question. How do you control the sky? And so its story leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today, whether you're in a boardroom or a research lab, as it was on that bridge in 1945. Are you, right now, putting all your best resources and all your passion into perfecting an answer to a question that the world has already stopped asking?